Alright class, in this video we're going to go over the properties of matter. It actually does matter if you learn this, because it involves matter. Get it, matter. If something has matter, that means it takes up space and it has mass. Now you could look at different properties of matter. The main properties are the physical properties or the chemical properties. Your physical properties of matter is a characteristic of an element or compound that can be observed without a reaction of the substance. That means you're keeping the substance exactly the way it is. A chemical property, on the other hand, needs a reaction in order to be measured. Okay? Some of the physical properties of matter are color, texture, that's what it looks like, malleability, like for metals they can be pressed into different shapes, mass, volume, density, viscosity, that's how fast liquids flow, solubility, that means it could dissolve solutes, boiling, freezing, melting points, and odor. These are just not needing a chemical reaction. Key part one is solubility is not a chemical change. Chemical properties are, say, heat of combustion, that's the energy required to release heat, reactivity, to see how fast it reacts, or pH, how acid or basic it is. Now, in a lot of cases, you might hear of physical and chemical changes. You might hear of the term that chemical changes can't be reversed. Now, that's not necessarily true, because when you take pH, if you take an acid and add a base to it and add an indicator, you're actually going to be able to reverse the reaction. See the other video I made on acids and bases in this playlist. Alright, the difference between a physical change and a chemical change. A physical change is when atoms do not rearrange. They're staying in the exact same order. They're usually easy to reverse. No energy is produced or taken up or absorbed. A chemical change, on the other hand, is a rearrangement of atoms into different molecules with a new chemical formula. If you ever see a reaction that has a new configuration, like H2 plus O2 makes H2O, you have a different arrangement of atoms, that will be a chemical change. Energy is often produced, and both physical and chemical properties are changed. Some physical changes, cutting or tearing, say a piece of paper, boiling, melting, freezing. Phase changes are physical. Also dissolving water in a solute. Some chemical changes, if you have reactions, gas production usually is chemical unless it's boiling. Precipitate, you get a solid formed. Odor or color change, burning, tarnishing, fermenting, digestion, and so on. You also need to know the difference between extensive and intensive properties. An extensive property is a characteristic of a substance which depends on the amount. So if you have more or less, that'll be extensive. An intensive property, on the other hand, is a characteristic does not depend on the amount. Go ahead and remember it. Extensive means on how much it extends, what's on the outside. Intensive property depends on the composition or what's inside. Extensive extends, intensive inside. Some extensive properties are mass, volume, length, because obviously you have more of it, it will change its property. Intensive would be color, smell, luster, that's shininess, malleability, hardness. Ductility means you can make a wire out of it. Melting, freezing, boiling point. Density is an intensive property, because remember the equation for density, it's your mass divided by your volume. You notice mass and volume are both extensive properties, but when you divide the two, assuming it's the same structure, it's going to stay the same. It'll be intensive. Alright, there are 4 different phases or states of matter. You need to know the properties of each. In a solid phase, you have a definite shape and definite volume. If I take a beaker and then I have some ice cubes in it, the ice cubes are molecules are actually going to vibrate back and forth, but they're not going to rearrange themselves. They're going to stay in the same configuration. Vibrate only. A liquid phase has a definite volume, definite amount of size, but no definite shape. It could change shapes. It takes the shape of its container. Think about if you have a graduated cylinder that's really thin and you put it in a big beaker, the water will still stay the same volume but change shape. Gases have no definite shape or volume. It still takes the shape of its container. The key part actually spreads out to fill the spaces in the container. Also, in your kinetic molecular theory, your particles move very fast and are very spread out, and your particles will bump into each other in their container. They're the only phase that's easily compressible, means that they could, if you apply pressure to it, you change the properties. Plasma has no definite shape or volume. That's where your ions actually move independently of each other. If you take a piece of grape, cut it in half, put a glass over it, and put it in a microwave, you could actually see plasma forming. And another way that you could categorize matter, matter again is everything that has mass. You could mix up matter into mixtures or pure substances. A mixture has variable composition. The components will retain the properties of their original characteristics. You can actually separate them using physical methods, which we'll see earlier. And you have different properties. Differences are homogeneous and heterogeneous mixtures. Homo means same composition throughout, while hetero means opposite. Difference between mixtures, you could also have a substance. From a substance is a fixed composition of elements or compounds. You cannot separate them physically, but you could separate them chemically. A substance could either be an element or a compound. Elements from the periodic table cannot be broken down into something simpler, while a compound can be broken down chemically. You always have a definite ratio, like water is H2O. That would be considered a compound because I always have 2 molecules of hydrogen for every 1 molecule of oxygen. Here are some techniques that you could separate different mixtures and also compounds. Hand separation at times, if the particles are big enough. You use filtration, use a filter, think about coffee. Distillation, you heat the mixture and separate it by boiling point. That's why you have, say, salt and water and you want to get the water out, you boil the water. Chromatography, you separate by using fluid. Centrifuge machine is when the sample spins around very quickly. Evaporation, boil out the liquid. Crystallization, that's when you have a supersaturated solution and cool it down. Sublimation is when you change from a solid directly to a gas. You can also change with magnetic separation if you have a magnetic substance. Homo and heterogeneous mixtures could separate into pure substances using a mixture, get it, mixture, many of these techniques, depending on what's in the mixture. Alright class, so throughout this year we're going to be using the characteristics of mixtures to determine how physical changes occur. Feel free to look back at this video throughout the year to know your definitions. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. Alright class, so throughout